Hi, this is Kimberly. The date of today's testimony we're about to view is Tuesday, May 14th, 2019. This is part 1 of day 6, and it took a long time to get here, didn't it? I think day 4 took me 12 parts, or 12, yeah. I'm going to do something a little different. Imagine that. I'm not going to talk much about what went on in the courtroom because I just want it to be a surprise to you. Don't want to spoil anything. I might give you some hints though, or maybe in a few minutes I'll forgotten I said that and I'll blurt it all out. What I mean is I'm not going to spoil it for you, nor will I give my thoughts about, not yet anyway. Not in this video, not in the next one. It's going to take at least 2 parts for this, maybe 3. Do y'all think that Mrs. Zahn was that mean girl in school? You know, that real smart, mean girl? I think we're seeing just that playing out in the courtroom. You'll see it in today's testimony, or rather closing arguments. I said I wasn't going to talk much about it, but I just have to say that she sat and glared at Mr. Carter pretty much the whole time he was talking. You know, McNabb's lawyer. She was looking anxious, like she just wanted to come up out of her chair, like levitate or something. Good God Almighty, Kimberly. Did Miss Zahn look like she was gonna be suspended over the courtroom or something? Wouldn't folks see up her skirt and shit? Back to Mean Girl. I mean Miss Zahn. I know her type when I was in high school. She made good grades, was pretty and bitchy to everyone, but all the world, well, you know, high school world. Those kids are so self-absorbed, they don't realize there's stuff going on outside of school. There was plenty for Miss Zahn taking SAT tests just for the fun of it. And of course she was involved in sports and band, cheerleading, the chess club, science club, the honor roll, and was probably involved in student council too. As a matter of fact, she loved to spend her lunch hour in study hall working with students to resolve problems. She would just work as a liaison between students and staff. Didn't you hate that girl? She was often at the high school until 10 p.m. at night. That rumor of her and that geometry teacher was just that. It was just a rumor, unsubstantiated. There was no physical evidence. It was unfounded, baseless, unverified, and without foundation, fake, illogical, and false. She gathered her books and papers and her stapler, held her head high, and marched out of the school just having been named valedictorian as well as prom queen, and walked out with her back of her skirt tucked into her knickers. That girl had gumption, I tell you. If I wasn't older than her, I would have sworn I went to high school with her. Then, shortly after high school, she announced she would become a vicious, savage prosecutor. A prosecutor. Zahn actually began her career in the Newton County DA's office in 2000, following graduation from Georgia State University College of Law. Ain't she just pretty as a peach? I wonder if she got a headache from her passive-aggressive retort to Carter with his whiny, fretful, beseeching, his closing arguments. You know what I mean. She rolled her eyes so damn much she was starting to look blind. Anyway, moving ahead. Up next was Mr. Frost. I was putting together some kitchen organizational shit while I was listening to this last day of testimony. And I was fed the fuck up. Not of the trial. It was of my pots and pans and Tupperware and shit tumbling out of everywhere. And I bought all this organizational shit and I put it together while I was listening to the trial. And I don't like it. I don't know what I'm going to do. Maybe some rearrangement will help. Or heavens to Betsy. It just occurred to me now with all those organizational things that I won't have the excuse of now storming off. It's almost like slamming off to bed, but I would just storm out of the kitchen, slamming cupboards and the refrigerator and the oven all simultaneously, saying that I had used up what little energy I had. And I was going to cook dinner, but now I'm not, goddammit. I hate my kitchen. But I got some cool can rack things, and I thought it was going to be all awesome. And I had to take a shelf out of the pantry, and now it looks weird. And I don't know. Then, like, there was a full minute gap that was cut out of the stream of the filming, while Mr. Carter was griping, and it just cut off all of a sudden. So I really thought his little red tutu had done jumped the track. I mean, he was doing his big concluding affirmations, and that 11 Alive news station seemed to be a bit asleep at the wheel with this filming of the court proceedings thing that I don't know how many times they failed to film. Well, I'll tell you one thing. Judge Ott embarrassed Carter right before he got up to do his closing arguments, and when it went black, I thought he had a meltdown or something. But back to the organizational bullshit that I was trying to do. Now, mind you, this all was going on at 3:30 in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning. The kitchen, oh God, it looked like a cyclone headed. That's why I had to do it in the middle of the night. That upsets my husband when I organize. But I bought these. Well, I had to assemble them, and I did pretty good, I think, and stuff, but I don't know. Epic fail. Isn't that what they say? Epic fail? I'll figure it out. I always do. Now, Mr. Frost. I was, in the middle of doing my I said I wasn't going to talk about it anymore, but I was doing my kitchen organization stuff while listening to the damn closing arguments and shit. And, the shit was tumbling everywhere. Anyway, Mr. Frost. Well, first, before we get to Mr. Frost, see, I'm all jumbled up. It's like my kitchen is all jumbled. But Mr. Frost, raise your hand if you think Mr. Frost, well, sniff, sniff, or something. Good God Almighty, Kimberly, does he sniff, sniff, or something? Oh, the Snow White. Yeah, I remember from that other Chris and shit case. Anyway, someone should have passed him a facial tissue. Just wait. He did his thing. We got up there pretty much what I expected from him. And by his thing, he was, making movements. I make movements too, so I shouldn't talk. But he's worse than me. I'm just as bad. I'm bad to the bone. Anyway, yeah, the jerky movements and shit. Just yesterday, another full glass of ginger ale went flying. And it was full to the top with crushed frozen water. I was going to say ICE, but I've been looking up words that YouTube doesn't like, and they don't like ICE. I guess because they think I'm talking about the street drug. I'm thinking about what comes out of the dispenser out of your refrigerator thing, if you've got the front water dispenser and ice. Oh, YouTube doesn't like swear words either, but fuck that shit. Anyway, it went all over my fucking desk. And I was incensed with furious anger as all get out. It ticks me off when I drop shit, knock over my belongings, 'cause my flippin' hands don't function as they used to. Back when my brain and my limbs used to communicate, they would do things in unison. Apparently they've had a falling out. I guess my mouth did too, with my brain. I think I had a quarrel with my speaking abilities, 'cause I forget words all the time. I forget what I'm doing. But when I forget my words, all of a sudden, my dad used to say all of a sudden, it was like with a D and sometimes with a T, all of a sudden, my mother would never mind about that. When I forget my words, all of a sudden those dirty expletives just come tumbling out. They say the first things you learn are the last to go. I used to go to the backyard when I was a young girl, and we had a retaining wall with about 8 steps going up, and there was a huge old tree that had fallen during one of those winter storms we would sometimes get. We wouldn't get them often, but when we did, it was memorable. They could be bad, but I would play on this fallen tree for hours sometimes. That tree was there for years and years. It was so big, it hardly decayed, just laying there. And when it was finally removed, I think I was a young adult and had already moved out, and the backyard looked so empty. And the yard was much smaller than I had remembered it. It was massive when I was a kid. I loved to pretend, and I visited many places there. It was also a balance beam after I had seen the Olympics and the gymnastics girls. I didn't like coming in for dinner because I didn't know if I was going to get to go out again outside. But unless I was in trouble, I just had to be home by dark. It was typical for the time back then. In fact, you were told, don't come home until dark. And I loved the summertime. It's still my favorite time of year. But I wouldn't have to come in till like 9 o'clock. Now, I still love the outdoors. My favorite outdoor activity now is going back inside. Dear me, heavens to Betsy. Well, shit in a bucket. I'm tired. I'll be back to finish this. I'm going to finish this story in the next video, but I want to get this out to you now. So, to review, what you will see today is part 1 of closing arguments. Crystal Meth Lab's lawyer goes up first. This will be part 1 of probably 3. Anyway, much love and peace. Thank you for listening.
The final people the jurors heard in court before closing arguments begin were the parents themselves, speaking not from the witness stand, but from recorded phone calls from the jail. The father, Chris McNabb, made the call from the jail. He'd already been arrested, accused of beating and killing their daughter, Kaleah McNabb, in October 2017. The mother, Courtney Bell, was not in jail yet. She's since been accused of failing to prevent the murder. Both of the parents now on trial, and Bell tells McNabb on the phone she suspects he did kill Kaleah.
I don't have enough to say. There was nobody else in the house. I was asleep, so what do you say?
Hey, I didn't do it.
Chris, ain't nobody gonna come in our house, take our baby, and then ramble through our house looking for things of ours to put in the bag with her.
I'm telling you the truth, Courtney. I didn't do it, baby.
Prosecution witnesses have portrayed Chris McNabb as a violent drug abuser who often beat his wife and even wanted to leave the family and be free of kids. And they've portrayed Courtney Bell as a neglectful, drug-abusing mother who should have protected Kaleah from the father. Next, closing arguments. Then the jurors will have their say.
Are there any preliminary matters we need to discuss prior to the jury coming in?
Judge, there is a huge line out front, and I know there were a couple of people that wanted to be here, and I know that we can only do what we
This is
can do.
not an entertainment thing for the public. So I don't care less whether they're out there in line waiting to get in or whatever. We're about to start these closing arguments. I do not want people coming in and out of the courtroom during the arguments. That is distractive to the jurors who can't follow y'all's arguments because they're listening to the door opening or closing or turning around. It's kind of like a movie. I don't want people getting up and getting popcorn all the time and distracting me from watching the movie.
I understand. That's why I was asking if you wanted to wait just a couple of minutes for some of the people that were waiting, but if you don't, that's fine.
But that not go contrary to what I just said.
I don't know. I thought you
You
said
don't
you didn't want
know.
it during arguments. This wouldn't be during arguments. This would be before arguments. We just have a couple of
So you
5
care more about the audience than you do about these jurors? here
Judge,
in
I was
this
letting you
closing?
know. I was letting you know.
Anything else from anybody?
No, sir, but
Okay, let's bring the jurors in. As always, I'm going to ask you jurors, since our last meeting time, have any of y'all been approached by anybody, heard anything you're not supposed to hear, saw anything through media, the social media, the computer, the television, or through newsprint? Okay, everybody's answered no. We're ready now to start our closing arguments by the attorneys. The state has the right to open and conclude, and the state has chosen to waive its right to open, reserve its right to conclude. The more, y'all remember our conversation yesterday about time and the limits, it's the more expansive one that Ms. Zahn was talking about. Do y'all all understand that? Okay, then Mr. Carter, you may proceed.
Thank you, Judge. Good morning. I want to thank you all for being here. This has been a journey for all of us, I know. You guys have been attentive. I've watched you. Sometimes as attorneys, we try to read the jury, and I can tell you I would not want to play poker with any of you guys because I have no idea what you're thinking about this case. But what I do know is that you've all paid attention. I've seen you taking notes. I've seen you taking notes at important points. So on behalf of Mr. McNabb, we really appreciate you being here. An opening statement. I told you that Chris McNabb had nothing to do with the disappearance and death of his daughter, 𝐂𝐫. I told you that I would ask that you look for the who, the what, the when, the why, the how of this case so that you could tell a story of how this happened. I told you that 𝐂𝐫 was fed and changed around 5:30 a.m. on the 7th, that Chris was awoken by a text around 9:30. He checked on the girls and they were fine. I told you at 10:20, Clarissa woke Chris and Courtney up and she was gone. So the investigation focused on Chris McNabb. And how do we know that? By the way they were questioned on the scene, by the way they were questioned when they went into the police department. We knew that the police were looking at the people closest to the child, and they focused on Chris. So why did they focus on Chris? Well, he has face tattoos. There were physical altercations between Chris and Courtney. There was drug use by Chris and Courtney. But if you'll remember during jury selection, I asked every single one of you, there is going to be evidence of face tattoos. There is going to be evidence of physical altercations between the parties. There is going to be evidence of drug use in this case. Can you look beyond that? Can you take that for what it's worth? And can you actually base your verdict on the evidence of guilt in this case? And I told you if you did that, if you presume that Chris is innocent, if you focus on the state's case, you're going to find that you're wanting more, that there's reasonable doubt, and that I was going to ask you to find verdicts of not guilty. Now, our judicial system has evolved over hundreds of years, started in England. This system provides protections for those accused of crimes. It's designed to provide a reliable system of justice and to prevent wrongful convictions. That's a double-edged sword. Provide justice for victims, but also prevent wrongful convictions. The judge is going to give you the charge of the court, and that's the law in this case. A lot of times that's very important. The way that the law affects the facts in a case can be very important. In this case, not so much. The basics are here, but there's nothing legally difficult about this case. The defendant is presumed to be innocent. The burden of proof is on the state through Ms. Zahn, Mr. Alexander, to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, and the verdict has to be unanimous. The judge is going to give you a long charge on presumption of innocence, burden of doubt, and burden of proof and reasonable doubt. I just picked out a few of the phrases that I want you to remember, as I'm sure Ms. Zahn is going to do. The defendant is presumed to be innocent until proven guilty. No person shall be convicted of any crime unless and until each element of the crime is proven beyond a reasonable doubt. There is no burden of proof whatsoever upon the defendant. A reasonable doubt is a doubt of a fair-minded, impartial juror honestly seeking the truth. Reasonable doubt is a doubt for which a reason can be given based on the evidence, a lack of evidence, or a conflict in the evidence. If your minds are wavering, unsettled, or unsatisfied, you must acquit the defendant. If the state fails to prove the defendant's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, it would be your duty to acquit the defendant. In addition, the judge is going to charge you on grave suspicion. Facts and circumstances that merely place upon the defendant a grave suspicion of the crime charged, or that merely raise a speculation or conjecture of the defendant's guilt, are not sufficient to authorize the conviction of the defendant. This is an 8-count indictment. Mr. McNabb is charged in count 1 with malice murder, in that he, with malice aforethought, caused the death of 𝐂𝐫 McNabb, a human being, by inflicting blunt force trauma upon her head. That means that he intentionally killed 𝐂𝐫 McNabb with malice aforethought. As we go through the rest of the charges, please understand those are the rest of the charges. They're not separate charges. They all revolve around the blunt force trauma to the child. But there are several ways of charging the exact same thing. felony murder is murder, just like malice murder is. But instead of having to have the intent to kill 𝐂𝐫𝐢𝐬, Mr. McNabb only had to have the intent to commit either an aggravated battery or cruelty to children in the first degree. So in order to look at those charges, you've got to look at the underlying felony charges. In other words, felony murder means he did not intend to kill her, but he intended to do these other two things. So what are the other two things? Aggravated battery in count 5 says that he maliciously caused bodily harm to 𝐂𝐫𝐢𝐬 McNabb by rendering her brain useless. So I guess in some way you could say he didn't want to kill her, but he wanted to injure her bad enough to make her brain useless. But in effect, it's the same thing. If you do not believe Christopher McNabb committed this atrocious crime against his daughter, you will not find him guilty of felony murder or malice murder. Now, count 6, cruelty to children in the first degree, says that Mr. McNabb maliciously caused 𝐂𝐫𝐢𝐬 McNabb cruel and excessive physical pain by inflicting blunt force trauma. So again, counts 1 malice murder, counts 2 and 3 felony murder, count 5 aggravated battery, and count 6 cruelty to child in the first degree. Those are all counts that involve Christopher McNabb causing blunt force trauma to 𝐂𝐫𝐢𝐬's head, killing her. Okay? The count 8, concealing the death of another, says that Mr. McNabb unlawfully concealed the death of 𝐂𝐫𝐢𝐬 McNabb, which hindered the discovery of whether or not said person was unlawfully killed by placing her body in a drawstring bag and placing the bag containing her body into an indentation in the woods. If you do not believe that Christopher McNabb killed his daughter, then it's reasonable to believe that you would not believe that he concealed her body either. There's no evidence that he killed her, that he did not kill her, but somehow concealed her body. The one charge that's a little bit different in this case is count 4, murder in the second degree. Basically, this says that Mr. McNabb caused the death of 𝐂𝐫𝐬, irrespective of malice, irrespective of whether he wanted to, by committing cruelty to a child in the second degree. So in order to judge count 4, you have to look at count 7, which is cruelty to a child in the second degree. And that says that Chris, with criminal negligence, caused 𝐂𝐫𝐢𝐬 McNabb cruel and excessive physical pain by inflicting blunt force trauma upon said child to her head. So it's difficult to imagine a scenario, but in that count, Mr. McNabb is charged with cruelty to child in the second degree for negligently inflicting the blunt trauma to 𝐂𝐫𝐬's head. It's difficult to imagine how that would have happened other than maybe a television falling on her because he was on methamphetamine. I don't know. It's difficult for me to imagine a scenario where he negligently caused that injury, but that's what the charge is. Once again, if you do not believe that Christopher McNabb caused the death of 𝐂𝐫𝐢𝐬, then you would find him guilty on every single one of these charges. So what is the state's case? What's the state's case based on? Number 1, it's based on Chris and Courtney's lifestyle. Number 2, it's based on Chris searching in the woods after 𝐂𝐫𝐬 was found missing. Number 3, the fact that the backpack and the clothes that 𝐂𝐫𝐬 were found in were Chris's. Number 4, that Chris got out of the car whenever he found out that 𝐂𝐫𝐬 had been found. And number 5, I've lumped in what the state is going to say is guilty knowledge. In other words, he knew some things that he shouldn't have known. So I want to talk about those individually. Chris and Courtney's lifestyle included drug abuse, physical altercations, and face tattoos. We admitted that from the beginning. I talked to you about that from the beginning. We said we could look beyond that and look at the evidence in this case. So what do those things in particular tell you about the who, the what, the when, the where, and the how of this case? And the answer is not a lot. There's nothing about those particular facts that separate Chris McNabb as being the person who killed 𝐂𝐫𝐬. These are background facts, which we fully admitted. Chris's search of the woods after Ǩ'Leah was determined to be missing? Well, we know from Courtney that Chris was on the couch with her asleep when Clarissa woke them up. Melissa Davis came over to the trailer, and before Chris went out into the woods, Melissa Davis touched his hands. She said he was clean and dry, and that, importantly, he did not carry anything away from the trailer. And what does that tell you? That tells you that Chris McNabb did kill this child. He either didn't do it in the trailer, or the child was not still in the trailer when he went out into the woods, and that's important. If he would have gone out earlier and put her body out in the woods where she was found, we would expect his clothes to be wet, we would expect his shoes to be dirty. There's no evidence of that in the trailer or on Chris. So what does that all mean? Like, what does that mean to the story of who, what, when, where, and how? You've heard evidence that the backpack and clothes that Ǩ'Leah was found in were Chris's. Now, whether he is a crazed meth fiend or whether he is a cruel, planning monster, under what circumstances would a person who killed this child place her in his own bag with his own clothes? How did that happen? But we do know, and there's no question, that the tote carrying Chris's stuff was right beside Ǩ'Leah when the last time he saw her, or the last time that Courtney saw her at 5:30. The tote was right beside Ǩ'Leah. By 10:20 in the morning, the tote had been moved over and was sitting on the bed. So somebody had clearly done something with that tote. And we know from Chris's statement that his clothes were in that tote, and his bag was probably in that tote. So what does all that mean? What does that mean to this case? We've heard evidence that Chris got out of the car whenever he heard that Ǩ'Leah had been found. We know that law enforcement focused on him from the beginning, and he knew it. We knew that Kim, Courtney's Aunt Kim, was yelling, "Chris did it," on the phone. And we know that Pam not only told Chris to get out of the car, she got out of the car, opened the door, and let him out. The state's also going to say that Chris had guilty knowledge because he went into the woods, searched the woods in that general area, and that he had placed a camo jacket in that area. Now, despite comments to the contrary, it's clear that that cut-through was used. You all saw it. We all walked it. There's trash. There's stuff all along that cut-through. It's a very clean, clear area. We heard also that in 2017, Henderson Mill Road did not stop over at the church. Henderson Mill went straight down to Henderson's restaurant and Henderson's grocery store. So there's every reason to believe that Chris and many other people used that cut-through. And if Chris going into that area leads you to believe that he killed Ǩ'Leah, what does it mean if Ǩ'Leah wasn't even there on the 7th? How does that affect your decision as to whether Chris did this if Ǩ'Leah wasn't even there on the 7th? Again, when Chris got out of the car, he was clearly a suspect. There's ample evidence from Kim Weatherford, Pam Hamby, that Chris knew that Ǩ'Leah had been found, that she had been found dead in the woods, that Kim was yelling at Chris, that Chris did it, Chris did it, Chris did it, and Pam told him to get out of the car. Now, instead of heading in any other direction, as you've seen from the maps, Chris headed directly toward the trailer. He did get out of the car. He walked directly toward the trailer. He walked to the Chevron station. He walked in, said, "This is who I am," knowing they would call the police. When the police got there, he voluntarily laid down and was arrested. That's not guilty knowledge. In over 8 hours of statements, at one point, Chris says, "I loved her." No, he said, "I love her." And Courtney said, "What do you mean loved her? What does that mean?" And so one might say that's guilty knowledge. He knew she was dead at that time. There are a couple of things about that. Number one, you could tell he was losing hope as time went by anyway. But he immediately corrected himself. "I didn't mean to say loved, I meant love." And moments earlier in his statement to Jeff Alexander, I mean, literally 10 minutes earlier, they were talking about Kalia's hair. And he said her hair is going to turn out just like mine. That is not the statement of a man who knows his child is dead. That is that's a statement of a man who still has hope that she's still alive, and that when she grows up, her hair is going to be just like his. It's going to turn out just like his. So what are the weaknesses in the state's case? Number one, there's a strong, consistent timeline that shows Chris McNabb did not do this. There's a lack of any direct evidence, witnesses, scientific evidence. And then you've got this guided investigation. So with regard to the strong, consistent timeline, Chris and Courtney both saw Aaliyah alive and well around 5:30 a.m. It's uncontradicted that these parties both saw her alive and well at 5:30. Chris says that he saw Aaliyah alive and well at 9:30. And there's no particular reason for him to say that he got up. I mean, yes, we know that his dad texted him at 9:30, said, "Are you awake?" And he said, "Yes, I'm awake." But he does not have to say, "I got up and they were fine at that time." He doesn't have to limit the timeline, but he does, because he did. He did get up and check on Clarissa and Aaliyah, and they were fine at 9:30. Chris and Courtney both woke up around 10:20, and Aaliyah was gone. Now, you've got a lot of Facebook records, you've got a lot of information to deal with, but please go through thoroughly and check that we're all correct, because we've gone through all these records. The records back up this timeline. We see activity on Chris's phone at 5:30 in the morning, 5 to 5:30 in the morning, all the way up until 5:50 in the morning. That's completely consistent with their timeline of where they were. They went to bed around 5:30. He laid on the couch, and he was off Facebook by 5:50. At 9:33, his dad called him, texted him and said, "I'm putting some money in for you for rent." Chris said, "I'm awake." Or he said, "Are you awake? I'm putting money in." Yes. We know that at about 9:42, he got on Facebook and he realized he had blocked Courtney Morris. So he just wrote back to her, "Hey, sorry, I didn't mean to block you." And he tried to call her, but she didn't answer. At that point, he went back to bed. Now, he does not remember that in his statements, but again, there are lots of things that we do that we don't necessarily remember when exactly we did it. But that call is completely consistent with the timeline that Chris was awake at 9:30, went to sleep after 9:42, after 9:45, sometime during that time. There is a lack of direct evidence in this case. This case is so circumstantial that it requires an enormous amount of speculation on your part to say Chris McNabb is guilty of this crime. And I got to remind you, this is not Las Vegas. We're not laying down odds on who did it. And you are not investigators in this case. You are not given the choice of finding out who actually killed her. Your only job is to do your duty, which is to give Chris McNabb due process. Due process means presuming that he's innocent, making the state build its case. It's not who do you think the most likely person to have done it is. It's did the state prove Chris McNabb guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. Guided investigation. We know, you've seen the evidence. They focused on Chris McNabb from the very beginning. They cut corners on the crime scene investigation because they believed they had their man. Is there anybody who has any doubt about either of these? That they focused on Chris McNabb and that they cut corners? Mickey Kitchens admitted mistakes were made. I just overlooked things. There are things that I should have done. There are things that I would have liked to have done, but they weren't done. And when you hear an officer who is up here trying to justify their case, trying to justify their warrants, say, "Yeah, I was able to eliminate all other suspects." Well, that's great. I wish he would have. But then when you look closer and you say, "Well, how did you eliminate those suspects?" "Oh, I just decided they didn't do it." That's not the way to run an investigation. Was there blood? Was there any other identifying information, fingerprints, anything at the trailer, at another crime scene? if the facts are on your side, you need to argue the facts. He said, if the law is on your side, you need to argue the law. He said, if neither one of them are on your side, you just argue. That's what Miss Donna's going to do. The facts and the law are against her, so all she can do is she's going to just get up and argue. She's going to try to poke holes in what I'm saying right now. She's going to nitpick things that Mr. McNabb said, take them out of context. You guys know any document, you can take something out of context and make it sound good. There are places in the Bible where it says you should kill your children if they disobey you. You can't take things out of context. You guys have heard all 8 hours of these statements. You've taken notes. You know this case back and forward. You know everything you need to know to make a decision in this case. And nothing that she's going to say is going to be able to change the fact that the state has not proven guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. We talked about the who, what, when, where, how, and why of this case. So who killed Aaliyah McNabb? Is there any real evidence Christopher McNabb killed his daughter, brutally killed his daughter? Did the state exclude the theory that someone other than Christopher McNabb killed Aaliyah McNabb? Have they done that? Have they excluded every reasonable theory other than the fact that Chris McNabb did it? And looking not just at the state, not like just at Ms. Zahn, but look at the investigation. Was this investigation conducted in a manner that would convince you that Chris McNabb committed this crime beyond a reasonable doubt? What happened? How was she killed? If she was struck with a blunt object, what is that object and where is it? We don't have any idea. Was Aaliyah in the bag when she was killed? Was she outside of the bag when she was killed? We don't know. If you think about that, why did the killer put her in a bag? Why was it necessary to put her in a bag? If Christopher McNabb killed her at 5:30 in the morning and took her out, why would it be necessary to put her in a bag? Why couldn't he just hide her as she was? And if he was going to put her in a bag, why would he put her in his own bag? He's about the only person who knew. He and Courtney are the only people who knew that was his bag. When was Aaliyah killed? Do you think Courtney Bell is lying when she said that Aaliyah was fine at 5:30 in the morning? Does anybody believe that Courtney Bell was lying about that? Does anybody believe Chris McNabb was lying when he said Aaliyah was fine at 9:30? And if you don't believe that, if you don't believe that Chris got up, checked on the girls, texted with his dad, and sent a Facebook message at 9:30, and they were fine, why don't you believe that? What is it about this case that makes you not believe that Aaliyah was fine at 9:30? If Mr. McNabb had done this between 5:30 and 10:30, a meth person who uses meth, wouldn't he be freaking out? Wouldn't he be worried? Wouldn't he be trying to cover his tracks? No, instead he's asleep on the couch with Courtney. Do you, sitting here today, honestly have any idea when Aaliyah was killed? Where was she killed? Did Chris completely lose his mind and kill Aaliyah in the back bedroom of the trailer? If so, why didn't Clarissa wake up? Why didn't Courtney wake up? If not, if he didn't do it in the trailer, he had to have planned this. He had to have said, I'm tired of this child, I'm going to go kill her. So he took her out somewhere else and killed her. If he did that, why did he put her in his own clothes? Why did he place her in an area very close to an area that people already know he hides things? People already know he hides that camo bag in that area. We've all seen where the camo bag was. We've seen where the body was. Why would he do that? If he had time to plan, if he had time to take her out of the trailer before he killed her, why would he do that? None of these scenarios make any sense at all. And why was Aaliyah killed? The state's going to tell you, we don't have to prove any motive at all. You see a lot of crime shows, a lot of courtroom dramas. People, what's the motive in the case? In Georgia, it's true. The judge is going to tell you the state doesn't have to prove a motive. But isn't that something you want to know when you're making your decision? There were no pre-existing injuries, no evidence whatsoever that Chris ever hurt any child. Aaliyah, Clarissa, any child. if this was just a sudden act of passion, how did it happen without any witnesses, without any physical evidence, or any other indication that Christopher McNabb killed this child? If this is just a spur-of-the-moment act of passion, why is there no evidence? We know that Tim Bell, Megan Sorrells, any number of people could have and did take care of 𝐂𝐫 when Chris and Courtney were struggling. Chris knew that. Chris knew that his dad would take care of 𝐂𝐫. He knew that Tim would take care of 𝐂𝐫. He actually, on the day before she died, on October 6th, we have evidence that he fought for his children, that he fought for them to come back from Tim Bell's house because he wanted to be with his children. He wanted to be with 𝐂𝐫. We know that. So why, 12 hours later, did he decide that he was going to kill her? Now, the defense has no burden whatsoever. The judge is going to tell you can't hold that you can't hold the fact that Mr. McNabb didn't testify against us. You can't hold the fact that we didn't call any witnesses against us. The defense in this case is that Christopher McNabb did not do this and that the state cannot and did not prove that he was guilty. But if I had to make some guesses, is it not possible and even probable that somebody grabbed 𝐂𝐫 while Chris and Courtney were sleeping? Clarissa's sleeping right here. There's a tote right beside her. Somebody grabbed that tote, apparently grabbed some stuff off the top of it. The stuff on the top of it was underwear, clothes from Chris, and Chris's bag. Why they grabbed that, I don't know. Again, we have no burden. But what if they did grab that and they took 𝐂𝐫? At some point on October 7th or 8th, 𝐂𝐫 died. Whether it was by this person's hand, but whether it was an accident, we don't know. And then what if, once this came on the news, this became a very public case, what if the kidnapper waited until the initial search ended, drove down Henderson Mill Road and deposited 𝐂𝐫 in a convenient spot right off the road? Now, a lot of people are wondering why I asked that you be able to go out to the crime scene. I wanted to show you that if you're coming from the trailer and you're heading to the place where the body is found, you are faced with a long line of woods. So to get to that spot, you're either going to have to go through briar, woods, everything straight ahead, or you can go around to the right. I know you guys recall, we were just there last week. You can go around to the right. There's still woods blocking your way in that direction. If you were to back up and get again to the wood line and go around the side where that other person's property is, if you go around that way, you're still looking at woods. The only way to really logically go from the trailer park to that area where the body was found is exactly the way we went. You would go straight through the cut through because it's easiest. You would walk over to the little trash can, you would see the indentation, you would go over there and you would do your best to put her under the log and you try to cover it up. That is less easily done from the trailer park than it is from somebody driving down Henderson Mill Road, knowing the trailer park is on the other side of the woods, looking out from their car, seeing there's a place to put the body, to stash the body, and doing it very quickly. I'm not saying that happened, but it's very, very logical. It's very, very reasonable to believe somebody did that. And we know that Chris McNabb did not do that. From the time they called the police till the time he jumped out of the car the next day, he was with somebody. He was with Courtney, he was with Craig Weatherford, he was with Jeff Alexander. So we know Chris didn't do that. So who did? This is the state's theory, as far as I can tell, based on the evidence right now. Chris McNabb brutally killed 𝐂𝐫 3 feet from Calissa while Courtney was sleeping in the other room. Chris then decided to use his own bag to put 𝐂𝐫 in. He decided to use his own clothes to cover her up. And then he decided to hide her about 100 feet from a place where he'd already hidden other things. And Courtney and Shane Kidd knew that he had hidden the camo bag. So he did those things. He got back to the trailer in time before Courtney woke up. By the time she woke up, he was already laying on the couch with her, pretending to be asleep or asleep. So what did he do? He helped look for her first, but then he immediately ran out within a few feet of where the body was found. And when the police got there and he came back down Highway 36, they said, "Where did you go?" He goes, "I went right over there." He pointed right at where the child was. These things don't make any sense to a person with guilty knowledge. This does not make sense for a person who had already stashed her body under that log. He pointed exactly to the log. Now, Ms. Simon was going to say, well, you know, he knew where she was, that's why he went out that way. It doesn't make any sense. Now, why should you find Chris McNabb not guilty? The judge is going to tell you that reasonable doubt can be based on evidence, can be based on conflicts in the evidence, and it can be based on lack of evidence. And that's what I'm talking about in this case. There's a complete lack of evidence that Chris McNabb committed this offense. The judge is going to tell you that if you have one reason to believe the defendant is not guilty, your verdict should not be not guilty. Let me say that again. If you find one reason to believe the defendant is not guilty, your verdict should be not guilty. I was brainstorming and I just was thinking of what are some of the reasons. Let me give you a few reasons. And if you believe any of these, then I believe your verdict should be not guilty. Chris and Courtney's timeline of events has been consistent from the time they realized _Aleah was missing and called 911 until today, right here today. All right? They said they put Clarissa and _Aleah to bed around midnight. _Aleah was up several times. Chris and Courtney both helped feed, change, and comfort _Aleah around 5 a.m. Chris woke up briefly around 9:30 a.m. and checked on the girls. Clarissa woke Chris and Courtney up around 10:20. This is our timeline. So how do we know that? Courtney's 911 call. From the very beginning, she has told this story, that they were asleep, they fell asleep. When they woke up, _Aleah was gone. We saw two body cams of the initial police getting there. They told the exact same story. They said, we were asleep, we woke up, she was gone. There were 6 recorded statements between Chris and Courtney, 3 each. In each of those statements, they held true to those timelines. And as I've said, all the Facebook records, all the messages back that up. Chris was on his Facebook until 5:51 a.m. He went to sleep. At 9:33, his dad called him. He told his dad he was awake. He checked on the girls. He messaged Courtney Morris, and he went back to sleep. At 10:20, _Aleah woke them up. They were both on the couch, and we know what happened from there. Courtney's 911 call. My daughter woke me up on the couch, and my 2-week-old is not in her sleeper. I have looked everywhere in the house, so I do not know any other possibility. I fell asleep on the couch. Me and him, meaning Chris, woke up together. She woke us up together. Now, Shane Kidd tells you that between 7:30 and 8:30, Chris was calling him, wigged out that _Aleah was missing. First of all, Shane Kidd is a convicted felon, and he's been convicted of lying to the police on 3 different occasions. Then he came in here and he lied about his probation warrant. He said he had no idea that he had a probation warrant, and the DA did nothing to help him with that. But Bo Alexander got up and he told you Shane Kidd would not come into their office because he had a probation warrant. He did not want to get arrested. So Bo made a call to a narcotics officer in Jasper County who was able to get that probation warrant lifted. 2 days later, Shane Kidd came into the office. Shane Kidd is absolutely unbelievable in this case. And the fact is, we've got all these records. We've got every account from all these people. There is 0 evidence that Chris McNabb contacted Shane Kidd between 7:30 and 9:30 on October 7th. There's absolutely no evidence that that happened. If you base a guilty verdict on Shane Kidd's testimony, it would be a huge mistake. Again, there is no evidence whatsoever of any prior abuse by Chris against Clarissa, _Aleah, or any other child. all the dogs, Elvis, Alpha dogs, they all tracked toward that easement, but none of them found 𝐂𝐤. You heard how many trained law enforcement officers were out doing grids around that property on October 7th. We know that the state's case is 𝐂𝐤 was right there that whole time. She was within feet of those searches the whole time. But a civilian, Tara Robinson, she walked from the church in the opposite direction, then she came up Henderson Mill Road with a search party. And what did she say? She said, I saw that log, and it was just arranged oddly. I saw some twigs on top of it, looked like they were arranged, and then they were covered with leaves. I immediately saw something wasn't right. So I grabbed a twig, and I looked around in there, and I realized there was a bag in there. It was not, on October 8th, it was not difficult to find 𝐂𝐤 McNabb's body. Tara Robinson, an untrained civilian, thought that doesn't look right, and she checked and she found the body. 𝐂𝐤 McNabb was not under that log on the morning of October 7th when the police looked. And if she wasn't, Chris McNabb is not guilty of this offense. So did the dogs track Chris's scent? We know that they were tracking 𝐂𝐤's sleeper, which Chris was the last person to be with her. I don't know. Jeff Alexander said they just went in that direction because that's where Chris said he went. But again, Chris told them exactly where he went in the woods looking for 𝐂𝐤, and her body just happens to be found the next day in that spot. We know where Chris was from the time the police arrived until her body was found. If 𝐂𝐤 McNabb's body was not under that log on October 7th, Chris McNabb is not guilty of this offense. Do you believe the state has proven to you beyond a reasonable doubt that 𝐂𝐤 McNabb was under that log? And certainly the answer is no. The autopsy shows that the death could have occurred in several different ways. Could have been an accident, she said, maybe a television falling over on top of her. It could have been several blows with a blunt object. And we know from the autopsy that she had no pre-existing injury. Neither Chris nor anybody else had abused that child prior to the morning of October 7th. We don't know if 𝐂𝐤 was killed in that bag or she's put in the bag after she was killed. And we know that there were leaves inside the bag based on the autopsy, based on the unpacking on the autopsy. What does that mean? I suppose the state would say that Chris killed 𝐂𝐤 in the bedroom and then took her body and his bag out and wrapped them in the woods later. Or I guess theoretically they could say that he took 𝐂𝐤, his bag and his clothes, and he took them all out to the woods, killed her there. I don't know what the state's going to say, but I can promise you the state doesn't know, and I know that you don't know, and that's the important thing in this case. Friday night, October 7th, about 8:30 p.m., 𝐂𝐤 McNabb was sleeping like a baby, and Chris McNabb seemed like a proud father. So that's 8:30 p.m. It's actually October 7th, or it's actually October 6th. I'm going to say Friday, October 6th. Craig Weatherford was at the trailer. At 8:30 p.m., he said, 𝐂𝐤 was sleeping like a baby, and Chris McNabb seemed like a proud father. So what happened between 8:30, 9:30, 10:30, 11:30, 12:30, 1:30, 2:30, 3:30, 4:30, 5:30, 6:30? What happened in those few hours to turn Chris into a cold-blooded, brutal child murderer? And not just any child, but his child. What happened in those few hours? The layout of the trailer shows how someone could have gotten in the back door without alerting Chris and Courtney. If you recall the layout of the trailer, what they call the front door is kind of on the back side of the trailer, but the front door comes directly into the living room. From the initial dash cams, we saw that there was a sheet hanging up right there beside the couch. That was basically just kind of a doorway, you know, a type of doorway. If you go down that hall, then that's the back door. Chris McNabb told you in his statements that that back door happened to be unlocked. They said they tried to lock the doors, but that door happened to be unlocked that morning when he came out. So we know that it's possible that someone could have snuck in that back door, grabbed 𝐂𝐬 for whatever reason. Melissa Davis was the first person that Courtney got in touch with, and she ran down to the trailer once they determined that 𝐂𝐬 was missing. Melissa Davis helped search for 𝐂𝐬. Chris McNabb was still there at the trailer when she got there. She says she grabbed him by the hands and said, "Be strong." She said his hands were clean. He was upset, but there was nothing about him that led her to believe that he was dirty, that he was wet. She said he just seemed normal. She watched him leave from there and said there was nothing in his hands. So we know that Chris McNabb did not stash 𝐂𝐬's body somewhere in the trailer or under the trailer or around the trailer, and then when Melissa Davis got there, take 𝐂𝐬 out and hide her. We've shown that's not a possibility. And again, none of us at this point know what the state's theory is going to be, but just remember that's not going to work for the state, because we know Chris was not carrying anything in the woods when he left at 10:30, 10:40 on October 7th. And again, we know that Chris didn't place the body in its final resting place between the 7th and the 8th. We know where he was at all times. Once he came back to the trailer, he was with law enforcement. He went over to the law enforcement center. He came back home, and he was with he was with Courtney and Craig Weatherford constantly until he jumped out of the car once 𝐂𝐬 was found. Even Investigator Alexander said, "We know where you've been." When he said, "I couldn't have," Chris McNabb told Investigator Alexander, "I don't think her body was there yesterday. I think somebody put it there, and I couldn't have done it because I've been with Courtney and I've been with other people this whole time." And Investigator Alexander said, "Yeah, we know where you've been." So again, we know Chris did not move the body after October 7th, after the police were called. In her however many hours of statements, Courtney told law enforcement everything bad she knew about Chris McNabb. And I guess that's one of the pitfalls of trying this case together. The judges told you can't use any of that information that Courtney provided against Chris McNabb because this is a dual trial. So you're going to have to try to get some of those things out of your mind. But I do want you to realize that she said everything bad that she's ever known about Chris McNabb in these statements, and she still knows nothing about whether or not he killed 𝐂𝐬. In fact, she does not have, she didn't wake up. She believes that he was on the couch with her and that they woke up together. Remember, too, that even in his third statement, which was December, 2 months after this happened, Chris begged Investigator Alexander to keep looking for suspects. Even months after he was charged, he was saying, "I know you think I did this. I didn't. Please don't stop looking. Please don't give up hope that there is somebody else out there who did this." Now, the presumption of innocence and the requirement that the state prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, it applies in all cases, not just shoplifting cases, not just small cases. It's amazing when we have a smaller case, when we have a misdemeanor shoplifting case, it's easy to say, okay, the defendant's not guilty, let's make him prove it. In a case like this, you guys want to solve this. You want to know what happened. But that's not what this is about. This is not about solving a crime. This is a very limited inquiry. The question asked of you is not who did this or, who do you think is most likely to have done this? The question, the very, very narrow question for you is, did Christopher McNabb brutally kill his child on the morning of October 7th. Not just did he do it, did the state prove he did it? There's so many layers there that, given the evidence that you have, it's impossible to convict. And that puts you in a bad position. I know that you probably came in here wanting to know what happened, or maybe thinking, well, we're going to, hopefully we can find justice for baby 𝐂𝐬𝐬, but that's not your job. Your job is the very narrow issue. Did the state prove its case beyond a reasonable doubt? If you were charged with murder and were on trial for your life, would you want these kind of things done so that the jury would know for sure, wouldn't you? Lead crime scene investigator Mickey Kitchens. Yes. Mistakes were made. There are things I should have done. There are things I could have done. And if I would have done those things, maybe we would know for sure that Chris McNabb did this. Or maybe we would know that Chris McNabb did not do this. Those things were not done. There are things sitting at the GBI crime lab right now that we don't know what the results are. Chris's clothes were never tested. And whether it be the day before or that day, that's something important you'd want to know. Do you not want to know if there was blood from 𝐂𝐬𝐬 on Chris's clothes? Would that help you in your decision? Would that solidify your decision as to whether he's guilty or not guilty? Absolutely it would. You cannot hold it against me that that didn't happen. That is all on Jeff Alexander. That is all on 𝐂𝐬𝐧𝐚� to prove to you. It's not there. I investigated Shane Kidd and all the other potential suspects in this case, and I was able to eliminate all of them. That sounds great in theory. Again, that's awesome. He eliminated every single suspect. So what did Shane Kidd tell you when you asked him about it? Oh, I didn't talk to him. Well, how'd you eliminate him? I just decided he didn't do it. Sitting here, right here today, are you not aware that Matt Lester was in jail on October 7th, 2017? I am not aware of that. Wow. This is one of the main people that hated Chris. He just got into a fight with. Chris told him on October 7th, if there's anybody that might have done this, it's Matt Lester. He never spoke to Matt Lester. He never did anything to eliminate Matt Lester as a suspect. I did. As soon as Chris told me, I looked it up. I knew he was in jail. The lead investigator in this case, sitting in trial, did not know that one of the other suspects was excluded because he was in jail on October 7th. When I first got this case, this is what I saw first, and it scared me to death. We went to sleep. When we woke up, she was gone. That is every parent's nightmare. I tried a case several years ago, early 2000s or whatever. The victim in that case was 2 years old. She was run over by a car. I had a 2-year-old at the time. And we try to act tough out here, and we try to act like things don't bother us or whatever. But for years after I tried that case, I would get up at 2 o'clock in the morning. I don't know why, but at 2 o'clock in the morning, I would get up every morning, and I would go and just listen to see if my baby was breathing. This is horrible. 𝐂𝐬𝐬 didn't deserve to die. She was brutally murdered by someone. Courtney Bell lost her baby girl. Chris McNabb lost his baby girl. If he did it, I mean, like Jeff Alexander said, he should be put under the jail. But there's just not any evidence. Probably the worst thing that could happen to Chris is that he loses his child, and then he goes to prison for killing his child when he didn't do it. We went to sleep. When we woke up, she was gone. One reason equals reasonable doubt. If you find one reason to believe the defendant is not guilty, your verdict should be not guilty. This is the end of the evidence. This is the end of my time with you. I'm begging you to look at the evidence, to presume that Chris McNabb is innocent, to ask yourselves if the state proved he was guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, to look at all this evidence, to look at everything that was presented to you and everything that was not presented to you. And please, please come back with the only true and just verdicts, which are going to be not guilty on all charges. Thank you.
Mr. Frost?
He's in custody as a person of interest in the case after a baby's body is found in Newton County. Now, after the startling discovery, police spent hours looking for Christopher McNabb. Relatives tell Fox 5 a search party found a 2-week-old baby's body wrapped in a blanket in woods not far from the home where McNabb's baby disappeared Saturday morning. Now, Fox 5's Marissa Mitchell has been on this story all day, joins us now live from the Newton County Sheriff's Office. Marissa?
Well, Doug, deputies want to emphasize that Christopher McNabb is a person of interest in this case of a body found, but they say they are holding him on a probation violation involving a burglary in Bartow County.
Had learned that the body had been found, jumped out of a car he was in at the intersection of Highway 36 and the bypass in Covington, Georgia, and then he fled on foot.